which is a new project space supported by Zilberman. I'm Nazlı Yayla, I'm the Director of Institutional Relations at Zilberman, and through this platform we aim to bring together artists, curators, institutions from different corners around the world to generate dialogue through conversations, presentations, publications and exchange programs. And I'd like to take this opportunity to extend an invitation to all of you, to other professionals, to institutions who are together with us today to collaborate and contribute to the program for the upcoming programs at the platform. And I would like to introduce Marjolaine, my colleague Marjolaine, the project manager of the platform, with whom we built this program together. For the introduction of our speakers today. And thank you very much, dear Iz and dear Füsun, for accepting our invitation today. It's an honor starting the program with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nazlı, and thank you so much all for coming. We're really happy to start this program with Constituting an Island because I think it fits very well into our program. The first program is called Instances of Erasure, and it connects memory, history, and personal identity questions. And I think all the works are very poetic. All the works, they're very diverse. But okay, so Iz is starting off, and Iz is a very diverse artist as well, cross-media artist that examines the persistence of violent histories through different materials in space and with language, connected with language. There's also a small ceramic work by Iz that is also connected to the film and some publications that you can freely read. And then she also responds to absences in official historiography through the spectral, intergenerational and speculative fictions. And this video also represents an important part of her work, which is her collaboration with Cizan, which I think is also going to be a topic of conversation tonight. Then on the other side we have Füsun, I'm sorry. She's an architect and a writer and a professor at HFK Bremen, at HFK Karlsruhe, and a graduation supervisor at the Royal Academy of Art in Den Haag. Her PhD in visual culture at Goldsmiths was called On the Most Powerful Catalyst on the Planet, and it provides a reading of conflict and capital through matter, and more precisely metal. So thank you.
My little humble title of my PhD.
I'll continue with the thanks. I want to thank Nazlı and Marjolaine for all the support and the invitation, and thanks for coming out at this weather. And thanks so much, Füsun, for being an engaging dialogue partner tonight. I'm looking forward to this and hoping it will be the beginning of a longer and deeper conversation that will unfold in time.
Yes. So yeah, welcome everybody. My name is Füsun. Thank you for the introduction, Marjolaine. I would like to also give my thanks, of course, to Zilberman Gallery here, which I have known from Istanbul. And I'm actually very happy that Zilberman has also now its locations in Berlin, but also forms a new location in Miami. Congratulations to that. So thank you specifically to Maurice Zilberman for these endeavors, but also for Marjolaine van der Meer, Nazlı Yayla, whom you just heard. Thank you. And thank you to Iz for the invitation to be your dialogue partner tonight. When we talk about constituting an island, we could also maybe wish for Zilberman to constitute a body of research and a community of thinkers and artists here in Berlin and across the boundaries of Berlin, of course. But tonight we're here to engage with İz Öztat's work. And Iz performs on multiple fronts, such as making, gathering, writing, translating, hosting, and mediating. Although her work, sorry, I need to put this down a bit. Although her work is dependent on the context with which it is produced, she revisits certain subjects: convergence of water and freedom, the return of the suppressed past and the present, potentials of fiction in constructing historical narratives, and ideological implications of his work. Her process usually begins with archival research and initiated dialogues, which manifests as an animistic quest for the potential of objects and materials in conveying knowledge. Ongoing collective processes are central to İz Öztat's practice, and she has been engaging in an untimely collaboration with Füsun, whom we will hear about in a bit, who appears to her as a historical figure, a ghost and an alter ego. This is a text that I also took from a website, so you might also know parts of it. When looking at Iz's work, it was really important for me to maybe understand what it is actually that I'm looking of, not only as a film, but as an artist work, but what does it actually constitute, or what does it mean to constitute an island? And what was clear for me was that by looking at the work itself, and while the video plays in the background, we're looking at a video that loops. So it's cycling in a circle. And what does it mean to really work with a loop conceptually too? So if you allow me, I would like to dive into a brief intro that in fact might read like a spell itself. Please correct me, please. It sounds not good, I can't hear. Today we will talk of emerged bodies, once emerged and later submerged volcano bodies, amidst water bodies, island bodies, formation of bodies, canoeing bodies, collective bodies, queer bodies, precarious and deviant bodies, police bodies, as well as river bodies, rivers with agency and a body of fiction. We will encounter a protagonist that takes us back in time, meets us today in our presence in October 2023, and might lead us in fact into a future, hopefully a more just future to come. The presentation today is not only a reaching towards Iz's work, but it is also reaching into the subterranean strata of a river, sealing an island, making it invisible to our eyes. It is a race from the surface, it is a reaching towards the skies of fantasy and fiction, of desiring. And there are unlimited possibilities, while simultaneously understanding fragments of the impossibility of representing violence itself. And while I read these words, the video plays next to me in a loop and cycles in a circle that one cannot escape. It is a closed circle. We come to see that constituting an island employs the action of circling. It is not static, it is not a noun, it is a verb. Of looping, reminding us that one may not be able to escape these closed circuits and circles. Understanding that terra is never firm, but it's a terra infirma. So while we cannot escape the circles, we might still interrupt them. It is these ruptures and the cracks and the wounds within which the entanglements become visible precisely in the very moment of an event or a catastrophe. With this, we come to understand that it is the ghosts that rise from their colonial pasts that are haunting us. They disappear and reappear. They lead us to moments of ruptures in a contested geography, a landscape, individual and collective histories. It is these ghost-like bodies and figurines that put a spell on us that come to haunt us. These are the bodies, I argue, that constitute the fabric that make up Iz's work. Her work, titled Constituting an Island, dates back to 2014. Iz has been working in her artistic practice, as I said before, with her collaborator, Füsun, a figure whom she brings to life. So maybe we can start from there, Iz, with one of the first questions, I guess, that relates to how your collaboration with Füsun, an avant-garde artist of an ambiguous belonging, has been initiated, but also how did she in fact end up on an island called Adakale, which is in today's Romania?
All right, I'll take it from there. As has been mentioned a few times until now, Zishan, who lived between 1894 and 1970, appears to me as a ghost and an alter ego and a historical figure. And her archive consists of text, photographs, photomontages, and rarely objects. And taking on Zishan's archive, I respond to it through my practice and suggesting a complicated temporality that through which I try to respond in the increasingly suffocating and authoritarian present. And this is a portrait of Zishan and the only one from her archive. And our ongoing collaboration since 2010 unfolds in chapters, and each chapter of our collaboration, which constitutes the autobiography of Zishan, manifests itself in the form of exhibitions accompanied by small publications. And today we will try to reflect, speak about two of these chapters that are somehow intersecting with the flow of the Danube River. Well, in introducing Zishan, referring to this object becomes relevant for me because Zishan's appearance to me and her haunting dates back to 2008, and it took almost 2 years to figure out how to transform this haunting experience into an experience of communication. And through this copper object, Füsun here has a lot to say about metals and how they are, they can channel many relational stories. And with this object I channel Zishan and am able to communicate with her. And tonight we are going to start with speaking about conducted at depth and projected at length, one of the chapters, which focuses on a tiny island that used to exist on the Danube River between today's Romania and Serbia. And we will, the publication also brings together different moments in the destiny of this island. So I'll refer to some of these moments. And how Zishan crossed paths with the island. And while doing that, I'll give a brief biographical note on Zishan. Zishan's belonging is marked by ambiguity from the outset. She is born out of a affair between Nezihe Hanım, who is an upper-class teacher, and Dikran Bey, who is an Armenian photographer. And Zishan is brought up in her mother's family house without anyone knowing that she's actually their child, as if she's an adopted orphan. And she spends time with the Armenian photographer Dikran Bey without knowing that he is actually her father. But this is revealed to her in 1915 when Dikran Bey decides to escape from Istanbul with the implementation of the texture law. And Zishan needs to make a decision if she accompanies Dikran Bey on his journey towards Berlin or remains in Istanbul. And she decides to live with Dikran Bey. And their escape route goes along the Danube River. And a friend of Dikran Bey's in Sofia, and an artist friend, helps them out of Istanbul to Constanza, and they move along the Danube. And during this journey, going through landscapes that are devastated by imperial and national struggles and fighting, Zishan encounters Adakale, which at the time holds a certain place in the imaginary of the Turkish Ottoman subjects. It's 1913, it's right after the Balkan Wars when the Ottoman Empire lost most of its territory in the Balkans. And because Adakale, this tiny island, is forgotten to be written into the agreements made at the time, it still remains the only Ottoman territory in the Balkans. So this gives it the unique quality of being the site of projections, imperial projections, for those who are the ideologists of the Turkish nation state, which will be soon established with a notion of homogeneous Turkish identity. And one sentence here kind of points to what is to come. This place is the only monument left behind by the old proud times. So those old proud times, and this is going to constitute what will then be the justifications for building a nation state by erasing all the other ethnicities and religions who are living in the geography that will be called Turkey as of 1923. And with this background, Zishan, on her escape route, encountering an island which holds such a space in the imagination, writes an utopian story over 2 years that is inspired by this island. It is a bit like an ethnographic account as well. So her island is called Island of Paradise and Possessed. Here a little background info about language, script, and also difficulties of intergenerational transfer. Zishan's story is written in Ottoman script, and when I work with her archive, I need not transliterations from the Ottoman script to Latin alphabet, and then also the knowledge of someone who knows Ottoman, or the mediation of dictionaries to access all those Ottoman words that are not in use anymore after the simplification of Turkish. So now that we will be looking at the story in English and avoid all these difficulties for the moment. And I will maybe give, and the shape of her island is in the shape of the word Cennet or Cinnet. It could be read both ways, because in Ottoman script you don't have to write all the vowels. So the utopian setting could be a paradise, or the word that could be also translated as going amok. This is the map of Cezire Cennet Cinnet of the island. And the story also tells about some time travel devices, some of which I produced based on her diary notes and this sketch. And maybe I also tell a bit about these travel devices and what they do. So her insights into the culture of this island are mediated through Zındık, someone she meets as she takes the boat to the island. And the people of the island came from the lineage of rebel bandits who sought refuge here back in the day to save their lives. And they realized that they could forget all they knew by washing themselves in the waters of the river. With the effect of the indigo-colored snails they collected from the shore, they could have a grasp of the island's esoteric knowledge. And this object is called conductor. For conductor, she writes, and I'm saying she, but actually she says, on the island, the genders are felt as shades of blue, depending on the amount of bodily fluids. Consequently, the desire and contact among individuals is as fluid as the river's water. So in translating it to English, actually I used S/he, and maybe I say Z now. The device that Zünder called conductor, when placed in the midst of butcher's brooms and activated with breathing, enables time travel to moments in which time has been bent with common willpower. And there's another time travel device, a ritual device in the story. It is narrated as a group of 8 to 10 people formed a circle around the object, taking their drums. One of them placed a handful of snails in the basket on one side of the device and started whirling at the center of the spring hanging from the ceiling. This ceremony enabled the community to communicate between the human and the cosmic time. And this brings us to what happened to the island in time. So after Zishan's encounter in 1915 and finding this story, I was able to go to the where the island once was in 2014, and the island does not exist anymore. It's submerged with the construction of a dam in 1968 by Tito and Ceausescu. When I was on the site, this is how the island, its absence, was accessible to me. I asked one of the most significant activities in this locale in 2014 was practicing canoes throughout the day, and I asked them if they could make a circle where the island was, it created the work. And when I asked how I could thank them, they told me to thank the national canoeing team. So all this utopian story then led to yet another national endeavor. So you take the utopia and the absence of with this, and maybe I here leave it to Füsun to unpack this story from another perspective.
Okay, yeah, I'll try. Thank you. Oh yeah, these are some of the works that we also talked about. So we shared the love for Avery Gordon's book called Goethestraße. For those who do not know her, she is a scholar based in the US and depicts in her book different stories and events. One of them we will come back to, maybe Sabina Spielrein, who's a very well-known psychologist for some, but for others not, because she has been precisely written out of history. But yeah, Avery is a fantastic scholar based in the US and a wonderful mentor also at Goldsmiths. So is your work that you just described, or we could say it reads like a circle itself. The text that I read was also referring to it, accentuating that aspect. But I'd like to also think of it as a conceptual vehicle, that this kind of circling is going on. It's kind of a ritual, it resembles a spell, or we could say it's trying to evoke something that no longer is present. Could you say a little bit about how you refer to this circle that obviously pops up in a couple of works, also with the conductor images that you've just shown? Could you say a little bit about how you work with the circling, but also the looping of the video itself, please?
I mean, the endeavor of collaborating with Zishan and trying to narrate a story with her is ultimately connected to the constituting state violence of the nation state of Turkey, the Armenian genocide. And when referring to the genocide and working through it in this process, I also refer to Mark Nishanyan's conceptualization of it as catastrophe, in which he draws attention to the denial that is intrinsic to the act of genocide, which eliminates all traces of the act of termination. And all those who survive are lose their capacity to speak after the loss, and thus catastrophe is not, it's impossible to represent catastrophe and to narrate it. And of course this would leave no room for agency, but ultimately acknowledging the systematic act and its consequences. I find this working with this conceptualization helpful, and trying to find a way of speaking about this constitutional founding violence of the nation state, because with its denial it also enables later cycles of violence to be possible, and it impacts my life personally, it impacts everyone living in this nation state, and basically all this endeavor is a way of narrating something that's impossible to narrate. And I am in the school of impossibility of representation of violence. I very much align with this line of thought, and try to find a way, a methodology within all this impossibility, and also impossibility of narration and representation, and coming up with a notion, various notions of temporality are central to this endeavor. Obviously, a linear narrative is impossible in such a situation, and also how to deal with a denialist presence. Present is one of the concerns, and this hauntological return of the suppressed past in the present becomes a way of conceptualizing time, and also dealing with this unconfronted past coming in the presence. In that sense, I see the video and the circle in it as this circle that you cannot break out of, that keeps returning unless you face it, and it becomes a vortex, a loop that you can't get out of. This is one of the meanings that is attached to it for me.
Yeah, and I think maybe we can go from there. I mean, it's actually something that could swallow you, right? It's also a vortex that could just suck you in, and there is no way of resisting it or coming out of it. It's also very interesting to think about this. But I had mentioned it earlier, sorry for my voice. When we think of this not being a static moment, but more as a relation, a vector, like becoming a verb, and direction of action, I would like to think a little bit about what Deleuze and Guattari say, that these are kind of directed relations, but we don't have time, or it's not necessary to go in depth into these kind of theoretical references. But still, for me, as I said before, the interesting vehicle for me is still how do you question, or how do you work with certain conditions of existence, not as static, but as in flux. How can you in your work, maybe also relate to how you work with text, writing, and language itself embedded in your work also maybe as a tool of play, of escaping, of rewriting, and exactly also breaking the linear narrative. How do you create this sort of non-linear narratives that feed into your work, or that create or constitute your work, in fact?
Especially in our collaboration with Zishan, text has been part of it from the beginning, and part of it has to do with also my working methodologies. As much as the work has an experiential side to it, a lot of it is also time spent with written sources and negotiating the ruptures in language, how all these discourses are registered in language, and trying to invent alternatives within language is relevant. So it's the nature of the work lends itself to being both material, visual, and also manifesting in language.
Yeah, I was also wondering in your work about, when we talk about the fixed notion of a nation state, we think that we think of these, and this is the violence in itself already in that idea, right? That we think of nation states as homogeneous constructs, right? So 99.9% has to be, I don't know, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, what have you, sort of monolithic religion, ethical, ethnic sort of belonging, which is of course the question: do we want to be contained by such ideas? But when we speak of the geography that we both come from, there's also another aspect that we know, things that cannot be further discussed in detail, things that are named, but also there is the notion of the Beyaz Turk, the white Turk. So what kind of further implications does it have for you?
I mean, this brings us to the positionality, I guess, exactly. And where do we speak from and how we claim that space. In the case of Zishan, in this narration that I shared with you, and in the different manifestations of it, being a white Turk, which is defined mostly as belonging to being Turkish by ethnicity and Muslim by religion, and these don't necessarily mean that it's certain codes that are practiced and that gives you privileges. And as we see in Banu Karaca's scholarship, the national frame is her book that I'm indebted to. And I'm thankful for her presence tonight and for her friendship. In her conceptualization, she refers to it as an agreement on forgetting. So it's not necessarily what we belong to, but how we choose to forget certain things and then experience the privileges of that forgetting and passing. And also, when you choose to ally with what doesn't fit in the dominant narrative, then you're also you may be punished heavily in this ideology. So I try to find a complicated. It has its own problems, but this experience of being counted. Trying to find a way to embody the other, it is a bit daring. And finding a language to speak, it's a not easy, not comfortable position, and I choose to remain there and try to find potentials from within that.
Yeah, I think, the positioning yourself, this kind of traditionally also comes from cultural studies, but also Black American writers as bell hooks, belonging ideas, I think are crucial, and I think they also lead us a little bit to the next topic that I would like to address, which is the methodology, which in parts you also see here on the screen. We have, all these people are, as we know, quite well known with what they offer. Say the Hartmann is probably one of them whom I would like to mention with her idea of critical fabulation, but also we're thinking of Tilde Butler when it comes to speculative futures. Are you interested to say a little bit more about how critical fabulation and speculative futures or speculation
maybe you can from there I can pick up from slide.
Yeah, the speculative term, you can maybe say the speculative term. Would you like to start to say that?
Okay.
Okay.
I was not familiar with her work when I started working on Zishan, but it became relevant for me as I claim to be working with an archive. And archives, especially in the Middle East, are very contested as all nation states in this region have very strong official narratives and very restricted access to archives. And when it comes to the Armenian genocide, the archive is a place, it's the site of the contestation where you either go, you are expected to go for evidence, and completely placing myself outside of this evidence discourse, as Saidia suggests also in her work, going to the archive to work with the absences and to also imagine through them what has been interdicted, what has been rendered impossible. So I work with the archive for imagining what it has been rendered impossible, and that's how I guess relate to the idea of critical fabulation.
Yeah, I think we've, and I'm also jumping a little bit here now in the script, but yeah, I think it's, the denial we said is intrinsic to the act of genocide because it not only eliminates all traces, but it also continues a continuum within the catastrophe that just lingers on and influences our presence to come. And I think it also speaks about the impossibility again of not being able to present. And I think with that we do not only arrive at the methodology but also at the meta level of this entire context of your work. But if you're fine with that, I would say a little bit about how I'm interested in the crack. So I'm interested in the crack and the rupture as Victor Fein and Iris van Talen would frame it, but also other scholars. And I was thinking, I had to think about my own work, writing a text that I published in 2014 in our collaborative work Forensic Architecture in the book Forensis, which was published in Sternberg Press. And here I write a text about how we have to think about Ground Zero not as a mediated event, but how Ground Zero or the attacks on the World Trade Center at 9/11 are really an event of environmental disaster. So I'm looking precisely at that moment as the very moment of the catastrophe in which all entanglements become visible through the crack, through the rupture. You can read into how governmental bodies, how politics, Wall Street, why was it opened up earlier, etc., than necessary, how all of these bodies are entangled. Because what the Environmental Protection Agency said, in fact, was to the Lower Manhattan citizens that the air was safe to breathe, which of course it wasn't a week later, and it still wasn't a month later, and probably it wasn't 6 months later. So, but through this event, which of course, there was nothing nice about it, clearly, but it is a very interesting moment that you kind of can navigate within to understand what after 9/11, what kind of events have unfolded, right? So, Saida Hartmann, the scholar, for those who do not know her, she's a scholar who retells the history of Black life and really engages in a very provocative writing in which she illuminates stories and that have gone missing or have not been told. And she precisely refers to the crack in the archive. You were also mentioning the archive earlier, So for me, there is a spectral presence of speculation in Hartmann's published publication called Venus in Two Acts. And if I may quote, she states, "Is it possible to exceed or negotiate the constitutive limits of the archive? By advancing a series of speculative arguments and exploiting the capacities of the subjunctive, which is a grammatical mood that expresses doubts, wishes, and possibilities, in fashioning a narrative which is based upon archival research, and by that I mean a critical reading of the archive that memes or mimes the figurative dimensions of history, I intended both to tell an impossible story and to amplify the impossibility of its telling," etc., etc. It goes on and on and on, but then there are the comments on how she with this forms the understanding of critical fabulation, or what speculating exactly brings to us in order to access what is actually inaccessible, right? So I'm a bit interested in this impossibility of its telling. Maybe we could start from that point as well, impossibilities of telling, counter-histories, and the concept of speculating, and how pivotal they are in fact to your artistic practice.
With the references I gave before, I very much am working from impossibilities, and with everything I deal with being very uncomfortable. I am not interested in easily stories that we are comfortable with, that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So staying in the impossibility and actually expanding on the impossibility is very much part of the work I try to do over 15 years now. And maybe we continue with another chapter that also follows the Danube. Shall I jump there?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, the work that I spoke about was from 2014, and the Danube River, which you see here as part of the publication also, it's called Danube Reduced and Simplified. The line is created by abstracting a line that was in a military map that documented the Danube River, and the breaks you see are where they cut the river to fit it into the pages. So Danube as reduced and like the impossibility of representation, one example. And then it came back in 2023, a recent solo show at Zilberman, Istanbul. It came back as a biographic, it's called Danube as biography, again reduced and simplified. And here it becomes a lifeline and a line along which a story is narrated. On the wall you can barely see the text here. But there's a story that takes place between 2018 and 2022, over 4 years. And it consists of excerpts from letters written by Z to a lover in New York. And it's a love story narrated in these fragments along the walls, and within the walls there are other parts of the exhibition, but I want to just refer to this bit. Obviously, with working with Dishan and working on an autobiography over years, the question of autobiography and how every life that is narrated is a construct, every narration of a life is constructed. And for this, two relevant references are both to the genre of autobiography and also in the work I do are confession and psychoanalysis. So here I also set a stage with these references as I'm trying to address autobiography. So there's my own divan, the way I like it, and a confessional at the back. And both of them bring different practices of how we narrate life in words, different practices from different contexts, but ultimately both relating to autobiography.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
The idea of confessing is totally scary to me. I've never understood how it works that you go there. So it's very interesting. But also I like that what you just said, that the body of the river was not representable. And there's so many mistakes or interruptednesses that actually appear in map making. Map making, of course, one famous one is of course the green line that was drawn with a green pen, and then not only was the color referring to certain sensitivities, it would refer it would not refer to one population or the other. That's why it was not red, it was not blue, but it was precisely taken as green. But then also there was a thickness of the line that we also discussed many years, for long years, what does the thickness of the line mean? And then because in reality then that thickness of the line of the pen that you're using is of course representing meters that are basically so-called neutral line that can't be entered. So I wonder a bit about here, if you could say a little bit about the thickness of the river, although it's interrupted. Is there something you could say about that? Yeah.
I mean, like any representation, it is arbitrary.
Exactly.
I can say it's arbitrary, and it was also, the way the maps and borders are planned, you plan them on paper and in meetings, and then they manifest in real life. So this was sketched and then applied, and there's always a discrepancy between planning and how things manifest.
So there's one confession. Yeah, okay.
And maybe I can speak a bit about the text that's on the wall, which was also another chapter of Zishan's autobiography that was published. And there's a lot of references also to artistic process of these works in the text, but basically it starts with the Z and the person she is writing to, these two women imagining a love story between Zishan and Vita Sackville-West, who lived in Istanbul in 1913, and in trying to imagine this love story, they fall in love with each other, and they even actually decide to have a parent. They decide to parent together, and then there's this long structural impossibility of trying to get a visa. And the story involves a lot of privileges, but the visa becomes anger.
And there's an
Hindrance that obstacle cannot be overcome, and then the love story falls apart. And there's one moment in the correspondence where Z refers to the diaries and correspondence between Vita Sackville-West and Virginia Woolf. They have a love story that's also become part of our literary heritage and are accessible. I need to read the sign, not so. So basically, at some point, Virginia Woolf, Vita Sackville-West writes to Virginia Woolf, "Would you miss me if I disappeared?" And 2 weeks after this, Virginia starts writing Orlando, which is based on Vita Sackville-West. So this moment that we understand that we will lose the possibility of loss or disappearance comes as an option. Then the move of the artist towards fiction, that was very relevant to me. And also, I thought that this love story started with imagining the love story between Vita and Zishan. as this love story falls apart, I also try to complete the story through a collaboration. If you don't have anything to say, I'll continue.
We'll come back to it in a minute.
So we see Vita Sackville West here, and I met Ra at the opening and thought they were Vita Sackville West and invited them to collaborate in imagining this story together. And when we met and started improvising with the story, which only we had a beginning and an ending for, which is that Virginia, Vita and Zishan meet in the photography studio of Zishan's father in Dikran Bey's photography studio as Vita comes for a photograph to be taken. They meet each other and fall in love at first sight. And they produce representations of each other as in the ways they want to see themselves. And after this time of playing and constructing themselves in relation to each other, ultimately the moment that Vita needs to leave comes and Vita leaves. So only knowing this beginning and end, we try to embody Zishan and Vita with Ra. And this idea of constructing the self in a love relationship and also in the work of art is, Claude Cahun's work is very informative in this whole story that I told you. But two things about her practice, which is, one aspect of it is that all of her photographic work is produced in collaboration with Marcel Moore, who is her stepsister and partner. And this being in a relationship and playing together, and the work, also the work is not shown and is written into the canon in the 90s, so they are actually not producing the work to show, but it's part of their relationship and life. This is also very important for me, the work that is not necessarily to be shown, but it is very much part of existence. So in, of course, imagining a love story, we also had to address some historical tropes with Ra, and we started preparing for Oriental fantasies. And why?
No, I'll come back to Oriental fantasies. Just go ahead. Yeah.
And why Orientalism in 2023 for me? Because of neo-Ottomanism that has been very prevalent in the last 20 years in Turkey, of glorifying the Ottoman past and mobilizing collective feelings through it. So this ideological use and romanticizing of the Ottoman past, and suggesting my own version of that history is very much part of this endeavor.
Let me ask the question, because I think there was a question before that, why we even ended up there. I think the Palestinian-American scholar Edward Said wrote his famous book Orientalism in '78, so many people know it. But Orientalism was precisely a critical concept, right? So he addresses the commonly contemptuously depiction and portrayal of either the East or the Orient, and then of course the question mark is what is in fact the Orient. But many writers, as Flaubert, as also French, American, English, German, have constituted a sort of a foreigner, the other, also that comes, this other-looking Oriental. But not only writers, but also people like Mozart in their work Escape from Sarai. These are the stereotypical depictions. So then the question is, of course, if you ask an American or an English or a German person, where's the Orient? They would all give you different answers. They would not know. One would start in the Balkans, one would start in Turkey and in Japan, the other one would go to the Arabian Peninsula or to the North African continent. You don't know where it is. But for me, what is most important is then to say, well, if it doesn't exist, it's precisely a phantasma. It's a phantasmagoria. which then links us back to your work again, right? So if the Orient is a fantasy, and it is a construct, I would argue, and Said argues that, of course, neither does it exist, nor does the Occident. So then, of course, and I guess you gave the answer a little bit already, is why do you, in 2023, why do you engage with fantasy and fantasizing and Oriental fantasies?
I mean, one of the reasons is this mobilization of this golden past, Ottoman past, for political ends over the last 20 years. And there's also ultimately the place that Zishan and Vitamid is a photography studio at the beginning of 20th century. And of course, all that brings us all the representations that are produced in Orientalist photographs of the time, the studio photography of the time. And most of the Orientalist depictions are actually created by decontextualizing and collaging certain elements to create a representation of the Orient. So the idea of the photo studio is exactly a perfect example of this, bringing together of certain elements that are supposedly representing the Orient and creates the fantasy of it. And also the voyeuristic aspect of Orientalist art, where it positions the viewer as voyeur and keeps them from identifying. So dealing with this idea of the voyeur was also very important. And one of the sources we used while working on gestures and scenes was a collection of postcards of Handan Rüştü that are kept in Salt Archive. They are about 100 postcards, some of which I mean, a lot of Orientalist art, but also depictions of intimacy between women. And again, another part of this, taking this on, is part of the Orientalist fantasy and of the harem is narrating intimacy between women for a male gaze. And there are no surviving accounts, again, the crack and the lack in the archive of women and how they lived and expressed the homoerotic desire in the harem. And we use the word fantasy. It was, of course, refers to a very personal and unconscious desire, but also there is something that is very much, it's a theatrical makeup, which also refers to history and social norms. So playing between this, the very unique and personal that we brought to fantasy from our experience with Ra, but also all the historically and socially constructed negotiated parts of what makes up a fantasy. So this is a photograph taken in Istanbul by the studio of Sabah and Joliet at the end of 19th century. And trying to reconstruct, this is a 13-minute video work. I'll just show some video stills from it, but playing with the Orientalist representations, its setting and objects, and this is a fantasy relating to the harem. And this is a Jerome painting of the Snake Charmer, which was also the cover of Said's first edition of the of Orientalism. This is how we reinterpreted it. It's a wider episode which ends with photographs taken in the video. Maybe we go a bit faster now. I don't know how everybody is doing. There's a...
I think we're coming to the end.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
also the aspect of BDSM, which I need to detour to another body of work for 2 minutes. BDSM has become part of my world of references, and it refers to bondage, domination, discipline, submission, sadism, and masochism. It's the short for all of these terms, and the culture constituted by them. Again, also we spoke about fantasy and working with fantasies. So in 2019, this is Goethestraße Square, where many of the protests used to take place, and still to this day, since 1995, Saturday mothers whose relatives and loved ones are disappeared under arrest are still demanding justice by gathering at this place on Saturday at 12 for a silent vigil, holding photographs of loved ones. The group by now is very small and being arrested every Saturday and then released. But in relation, this is the 600th week when the gathering was possible and the square was not sectioned off like this. So the fantasy of being suspended from this monument, which is built for the 50th anniversary of the Republic, I revisited that fantasy with an antidote, and we worked on a bondage scene together, which was negotiated through a contract in which the submission and the dominance was consensually negotiated. So one of my responses to not having agency in public space and not having freedom of expression brought me to the idea of working with submission on a consensual basis in private sphere and bringing it to public sphere, if this could be a way of speaking about the loss of agency in public sphere.
Can I do it?
Yes.
Yes, can I do? Okay. So, yeah, I mean, just to maybe wrap it up, we tried together, we're not going to talk about the transition from the female gaze to the male gaze. Let's just skip that for a bit. But I think BDSM is particularly interesting when we think about how we can emancipate ourselves from certain constrictions, right? Because these kind of bonding practices have been very much criticized by feminists. And why has it been criticized? Because there's a power exchange happening, there's a role play, but in artistic practice can also be wonderful, right? So there's a role play, it engages in shifts of power, submission and domination, as well as we come back to the terms of master and the slave, right? So when we think about how this links us back to the ownership of territories or the specific bodies, or how we relate to one another, queer desire here becomes very interesting, or the fetish, to take account in your work, and how you can voice concerns regarding, I said it earlier also again, regarding conditions of existence in this world, right? But also it becomes almost, although you confine yourself, it becomes a tool of liberation. But I want to give a very precise example. Two things that I just thought of when I saw this is the Saturday Mothers, which I think is very powerful, by the way. Reminds me of Smada Dreyfus's work, where the Druze women meet at the geography where families have been separated, and they chant over a valley, because physically they can't how do you say, they can't reach towards the other body, but the voice can. So they sing, they meet on it's very beautiful actually, but also very vulnerable. So they chant to one another saying, your mother, I miss you, and the daughters of the sons will chant back. And the voice is really the only instrument that is able to, I'm making the English, to pass, to transcend the geography or the valley that separates them. The second one that I want to talk about, because I want also for all of us to understand, because we're constantly looking towards the East, that we have, whoever we is, we have to also think about America, for example. When I'm sure everybody has been there, but maybe not in the moment of a protest, but if you have ever been there during the moment of a protest, what happens is, if you could bring up this Istanbul fence picture with the police. Yes, this one. This is precisely what happens if you try to, Barbara will know this better than me, if you try to have a protest in the US, what happens is that immediately you're so surrounded by these metal fences. So there is a right to protest, there is a right to freedom of speech, which is precisely constituted through the Constitution of the American Constitution in its First Amendment. But the minute you're confined into these sort of metal fences, of course, any sort of gathering of a group or any voicing of something becomes reduced, it's contained. The protest loses its power, right? So this is something that I was also thinking about. Sorry for going on. But yeah, a contained protest is really not a protest at the end of the day. So I'm really interested in how you then jump from that containment, that as a citizen you're not allowed to express your voice, how you then maybe represent that with these kind of bombing practices, or whether you juxtapose it.
So the practices of BDSM and reflection that started with the other work, of course, then seeped into the negotiation and the process with Ra, and also this making of the video. While making the video, we also drafted a contract between us, as we didn't know each other when we started improvising. We had a rule of not touching each other, and this made the objects in the video even more potent with meaning. And yeah, there are BDSM fantasies in that work, and maybe we just finish here with oceanic feeling and going back to the Danube. This was one of the sculptures, and it becomes a boat that here we are going through the Danube, and Ra spontaneously asked where I want to go, and I said, take me to a sunken island. So we come back to the island of Adakale. And
but maybe you quickly have to say what the oceanic feeling is, because I think not everybody knows it.
Okay.
What it means.
I mean, it is a psychoanalytic concept that has been articulated. There's a professional here, so I'm shy. Once I felt it, then I tried to, while trying to articulate it in words, then I accessed the explanation of it. It's basically this primordial desire to be one with the mother, that desire for not having been born, and such a desire for endlessness.
And coming back to the mother's body, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And it's a tough place. Yeah. So we end there with the ocean.
Yeah. To new horizons and openings.
Yes.
know there are fantastic scholars, artists, and curators in the room. I was wondering if we could open it up just for 2 or 3 questions, because I know there's a lot of potential here. And I'm not necessarily a curator of fine art, so it would be really interesting to hear the floor.
If I start as like the person in the first row, starting to talk, my main note, I was also looking at this work, Füsun, that you mentioned. For those who don't know about Mother Dreyfus' work, it's shot at Golden Heights, and it's a work that's done between 2006 and 2008, and it's called Mother's Day, exactly. And it was shown, I